Sauce. Hey, you late, Paz?
It looks like that. Here's Heaney from the boundary line. He's an expert at these. From the boundary line!
Hello and welcome to Behind the Boundary podcast. I'm your host, Pez. We're here with Sauce and we are here to talk about the end of the 2021 AFL season. We know finals are just around the corner, but today's show is a season over show where we speak a little bit about the All-Australian, and we're going to speak about the bottom six sides from the 2021 season, Sauce.
Hey guys, it's one of my favourite shows, Pez, to do at the end of the year. You get to look at some of the reflections that you had on at the start of the year, the predictions that you've done. You get to, sit there and wave your finger to all the people that you said, hey, I said they were going to finish bottom four or top two or so on and so forth. But most of all, it's where you get to actually have a look at what went wrong for some teams, or despite finishing, in the bottom eight or the bottom of the ladder, how well they actually did for what their list was produced. So it's a really good way to reflect on how the season went of 2021.
Yeah, so we'll probably speak about some of the sides and where they finished last year, how many wins they had, and if they've made an improvement, if they're on the up, if they're on the down, and things like that. We had Finster tweet during the week. He just tweeted us a reminder of our ladder predictions at the start of the season. An Essendon fan there, just wanting to tell us and remind us exactly what we got wrong.
Yeah, I'm okay with it, Pez, because 3 out of 4 I got right. So you may have one that you miss in terms of teams that make it and don't make it. But, a lot of Essendon fans would have to say that they didn't think that their list was a top 8 side and they hit form at the right time. And it'll be interesting because if they lose this week, then it all means nothing, Pez, because they extend their losing streak and they would have been better finishing outside the top 8 to get a higher draft pick and, I guess, less expectation for next year as well.
Yeah, exactly right. So we missed out on some teams playing finals, and that's the beauty of AFL footy when some teams, they come up and they surprise and they make a big jump and a big leap, and sometimes you can predict it and get it right, sometimes you don't. And if everyone got it right, then there wouldn't be any shows like this. So that's really good stuff.
Exactly right, Pez. All right. What do we want to do first, Pez? Do you want to get into the All-Australian selection that got announced this week?
Well, I think so, because that's always a big topic of conversation, and we've got the 40-man squad that was chosen, and as always, there are snubs from the 40-man squad, and when the team's announced, there are going to be snubs from the 22, and everyone's always got a different opinion, so it'll be interesting to see who we agree on and who we bring up that people might not have thought about yet as being a snub for the 40.
Yeah, exactly right, Pez. It's one of those difficult things. I mean, you're trying to get 22 players out of a season where you've got over 400 players in the AFL, and a lot of teams. It's interesting with this conversation because when you go to like American sport, Pez, the winning record plays a big part, but not so much in the All-Australian. It's one of those rarities where it's purely a stats-based a selection for most people. They go off the stats and they go off the impact, but wins doesn't correlate in this one. So it's a really interesting philosophy.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Brownlow medal when you see the umpires, for a fact that they're looking at the stats after the game and seeing who got 30 plus disposals, who did this, who broke these records. Oh, they must be really, really good. But in hindsight, you watch and you look at the impact of certain players, and you look at the impact of a player like Toby Green, who is named in the squad, but these last 6 games or whatever, averaging probably less than 15 disposals, but the impact that he had on those games willed their way to GWS making the finals.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about Toby Green there, Pez, because if you look at actually, you're saying, I guess stats-wise, his impact isn't always... it doesn't always shine through on the stat sheet. He actually does very well in a whole range of different categories. Like, he's number 1 in goal assists. So his forward impact, he's number 1 in goal assists and number 1 in score involvements. And like, that's
number 1 in behinds as well.
Yeah, I mean, like that's a huge stat, Bez. Because if you're looking at, he may only get 15 touches a game. If every time he's getting the ball, he's involved in a score, or he's giving a goal assist, or he's having a shot on goal himself, that's huge, especially with, the way that GWS played the last couple of years where they've really struggled to get scores on the board.
Oh, it's exactly right. And you can you look at all the players like who you got, your high handball getters. You've got your Tom Mitchells and your Jack Mcrae's, who's always getting the handballs, the 1-2s and things like that. So you wonder about the impact of some of them players. I think Mcrae, very well deserving in that, and I think Tom Mitchell is purely there just because of the amount of disposals. But as you probably know, Source, I don't think the impact that he has on games is as great that deserves him being in a spot.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at midfielders because obviously you're looking at contested possessions, you're looking at effective disposals, and whilst he is second in the league for effective disposals, a lot of his possessions aren't clearances. They're not contested possessions, and you're right. He does just accumulate a lot of the pill, and a lot of the time it is just those sort of outside handballs, getting the ball moving. And as I spoke at the start of it, he doesn't really correlate a lot of the time into success and impact and putting wins on the board, and that was very evident, in Hawthorn's first half of the season.
Yeah, definitely, and into last season when they only had 5 wins as well. So we'll get into it here. We've got the 40-man All-Australian. Do you want to go through who was named, and then we'll talk about who we think maybe should have been in there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was. We need to take credit to the teams that dominated this. The Demons had 7 nominees. Which is one less than Richmond last year when they had 8. They have who else did really well? So Brisbane Lions had 5 players. And overall, 15 clubs had at least one representative in the 40-man squad. Only 3 teams not to make it, Pez. You're North Melbourne, so they were unable to get someone in there. You had... who else did you have? Sorry, I've lost my thought.
Well, we had Richmond, who very surprising after the dynasty that they've been. And you kind of think you've missed finals, and have a look at that. You've got no players that actually made the All-Australian 40, which is not even the final 22. It's the All-Australian 40, so that's absolutely amazing.
But and then you've got Collingwood understand that one, though, Pez. You can understand that one because of the amount of injuries that they had throughout the year. So they number one team in injuries, so they didn't get a lot of players that had consistent runs at it and were able to accumulate, 17 or more games because with all the 40 squad, they're playing 17 or more games. So and that's huge when it comes down to not inconsistent, but being able to compare them to other players around the league.
Yeah, you look at that, and then you look at North Melbourne, bottom of the ladder, trying to improve in the second half of the season. They're not getting any side, and then you got Collingwood, who usually they've got a few. I think they would have had Taylor Adams in there if he wasn't injured this year because he was really great in that. Brodie Grundy had a down year. Scott Pendlebury's getting on a little bit and not really having that impact. You've had Darcy Moore, who got injured, who was probably a lock for the All-Australian centre half back earlier in the year. So injuries play a big part, and things happen throughout the year. And Collingwood, with their worst finish in a long, long time, possibly their history, finishing 17th on the ladder, getting no All-Australian. They've got nothing to look forward to until 2022.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about snubs later, Pez, but the only one that sort of rings a mind there would probably be, as you said, Grundy had a bad year. You had Pendlebury had a down year. Sidebottom didn't have a great year. Their forwards, Elliott and DeGoey, didn't have, consistent years. The only probably name that stands out is maybe Jack Crisp. And we'll talk about snubs later, but he's the only one for me that you sort of sit there and go, you know what, he had a really good season. He's probably AFL, if you're looking at stats-wise, pure stats, he's one of the number one defenders coming off that back line and into that midfield, just for purely stats. Again, we're not measuring impact and stuff, but, a case could probably be made for him.
Yeah, well, for the listeners out there, the players that did make it, we might just go through club by club really quickly. So Adelaide, you had Rory Laird, who's been an All-Australian 2 times before, and you had Paul Seedsman, who's never made a club before, ex-Collingwood player, a long right boot that is really accurate at times, and he's kicked a few goals. So he's made the All-Australian 40 there for Adelaide. You've got Brisbane, Charlie Cameron, a one-time All-Australian, Jared Lyons, Hugh McCluggage, and Daniel Rich, all never been in the All-Australian side before. So those 3 players in the squad, and Dane Zorko, a one-time All-Australian as well from Brisbane.
So Brisbane having 5 representatives, Pez, really interesting because they did have a really slow start to the season. And if you look at the way the season finished, and we're not going to talk about round 23, just quickly, one of the best round 23s that you'll see in a long time. We didn't, they only just scraped into the top 4. And when you normally when you have a team dominate the All-Australian, they have the second most amount of players. You expect them to be top 4, probably dominating for most of the year. So it's a great effort from Brisbane, and it's showing that they'll be a force in September as well.
Oh, they'll be a dangerous side, and especially getting that double chance with the All-Australian calibre players that they do have. You've got that there. We'll move on. We'll just go alphabetical order here, so we've got Carlton. Now, this is a really interesting one for me. They've got 3 players that made it. They've got Harry Mcrae, who's won the Coleman medal with 58 goals. You've got Sam Walsh, who's had the best, most improved season out of anyone in the league and become Carlton's number 1 player. And you've got Jacob Wiedering, a fullback down there that's never previously been All-Australian. But you know how you used to talk in the old days about the spine? Mm-hmm. You've got your centre-half forward up there. You've got your number 1 midfielder. And then you finishes with goal kicking, and then you've got your your centre half back, full back type player in Jacob Wiedering. 3 possible All Australians, and your club had that poor of a season.
Yeah, and especially when you look at those 3 names, and they're genuine contenders for the 22 pairs. Like your Coleman medalist and Jacob Wiedering, one of the best sort of backmen that he's had, numbers wise. And Sam Walsh, as you said, a massive improver, and as Source said at the start of the year, Pez, he would make an All Australian top 40. That's what's really, really disappointing for Carlton on the year that they've had, because it's the other pieces around. It's those older recruits, it's some of those players that are meant to make the jump. And as you said, you've got a massive spine there in 3 key position players. You should be doing a lot better than finishing 14th.
Yeah, well, 13th. Give them a little bit of credit, Source, with 8 wins.
Got rid of one for them.
8 wins and 14 losses. But you say those 3 names are contenders for the 22. Usually the Coleman medalist is a lock for the full forward position. So give that to Harry Mcrae. And Sam Walsh is definitely making that midfield. So at least 2 of them are definitely getting in that 22. Collingwood, as we've already spoken about, don't have to speak about them. They don't have any players in the 40. You move on to Essen and the surprise packet, who a young side were fast improving and actually have come in to make the final 8. So they play, the Bulldogs on Sunday. On this show, we're not speaking about the finals yet. That'll be our show later in the week, Source. But we've got Zach Merritt, who's been a 1-time All-Australian, Jake Stringer, who's been a 1-time All-Australian 6 years ago. And you've also got Darcy Parish, who had, another outstanding year, similar to Sam Walsh, where he's just come up and, dominated with a lot of 3 votes games he'll be getting, but he's never been All-Australian before either.
Yeah, Darcy Parish definitely one of those, surprise for your general football lover, Pez. But he had an amazing season. He ranked top 20 in some major categories across the league. Top 20 in clearances per game. He was number 3 in clearances total for the year. 16th in stoppage clearances across the year, 11th in effective disposal, and top 20 in goal assist as well. So he was just a real force across, not just getting the pillars we spoke about, Tom Mitchell. He was able to make an impact, and he was a big part of not only winning three medals, Bez, but a lot in their winning success. Outside of those medal games, though, because he definitely lost those games.
Yeah, well, they lost the games and got the medals, but in other ones, he had a big impact. It was shown during the year that he was able to be tagged out of a few games as well. So still developing, and when he can, do the things that all the great midfielders do, and shake the tag, go forward, kick goals, do things like that, then he'll continue to flourish there. And we get to watch him in September as well, which is really exciting. Fremantle we move to. You've got David Mundy, who's been there before, a 1-time All-Australian, and Sean Darcy, who had a stellar year, the ruckman over at Fremantle, and went right down to the wire. If they beat St Kilda on the weekend, they would have been in with a little bit of a chance if Essendon would have lost to Collingwood, but they weren't able to do it. And Sean Darcy had a terrific season as the number 1 ruck over there.
Yeah, and a pure ruckman too, Pez. We've seen in the last couple of years Max Gawn as a pure ruckman, and this year he's developed into a bit of that defender, and obviously leaked forward a little bit. You saw the Collingwood bloke Brodie Grundy. He became into sort of that elite midfield, but as a standalone ruckman that attended, I think it was the most stoppages around the ground. So not just a ruckman, but a mobile ruckman as well, who literally just put the ball on a platter for his midfield, and was a big part of them clearing up the ladder and just missing out on finals. And what a story David Mundy is, Pez. At age 34, making his 2nd All-Australian, and leading the club to the most games, leading them into a final series. Disappointing on that loss, but it's a huge year from the old man time.
Yeah, and he had to really stand up because they had injuries to their stellar players in Nathan Fyfe and Michael Walters. So he stood up. Don't give him that All-Australian cap just yet because he's in the squad of 40, and I'm not sure he'll make it to the 22.
No, I don't think
but he's good enough to get in the top 40, which is a great achievement in itself. Move on to the Geelong Cats. You've got Tom Hawkins, a 3-time All-Australian who, had another really strong year and was really important in games. And one of your most important players who is injured at the moment, but Tom Stewart, a 2-time All-Australian, looking for his 3rd-time All-Australian. And I'm pretty sure he will get his 3rd cap this year with the stellar season that he had, only missing with injury in the last couple of rounds.
Yeah, the last couple of games, Pez, and both of those, 2 of the 3 games that he missed resulted in losses. So that just shows you the impact that this guy has. You watch; he's one of those players where you actually watch the game and you're like, oh my god, he is absolutely killing us. And it's through intercept marks, it's through anchoring that offense, but. Geelong always seem to have representatives. I think Cameron Guthrie's a little bit stiff here, Pez, but Tom Stewart, he'll definitely get a lock in there, and Tom Hawkins, I think he probably will get another cap as well, Pez. We know that he likes to share the pill. He kicked, I think it was 40-something goals for the year, and I think he finished top 3 in goal assist as well. So a scoring force, and especially with that potent forward line, able to continue that sort of dominance, I guess, as a forward line with Jeremy Cameron coming in.
Yeah, and you think about all the other big names. You said Cameron Guthrie, who missed a little bit of football, but still, I think, could have made the 40 as well. So I agree with you there. You got Dangerfield, who was out with suspension and injury throughout the year, so he's got no chance. And one player that definitely would have made it if he played enough games would have been Jeremy Cameron, because he's had a stellar season for Geelong, but, didn't play enough games to be able to get in there.
Yeah, disappointing for him and the Cats that he couldn't get onto the park more, but as long as he's fit for finals, and that was very clear during the week, Pez, when you're listening to Scott talk about what they're looking for. It's all about September, and hopefully that is, he misses this year, but he'll make it next year when Geelong win back-to-back premierships at the end of next year.
Oh, geez, early call. Speaking about back-to-back premierships, I don't know if this is the best kind of thing to go on to, but talk about the Gold Coast Suns. One player, never previously All-Australian, Took Miller, and this one was an interesting one for mine. He broke the record for most 30-plus disposal games, which once he did that, he was, a shoo-in for the top 40. I think in the past, Took Miller has been really hot and cold. So he gets a lot of the pill. Some games, he doesn't get any of the pill the other games. But his impact, I think, was very minor in previous years. This year, when he's actually been getting the pill, he's actually been contributing to score assists. He's been kicking goals himself. He's actually had a big impact for that Gold Coast side in terms of being in some games where you thought they might have been blown away. And I know they were blown away in a lot of games towards the end there, but they were in games in certain quarters, and Took Miller was a big part of that.
Yeah, and it's not only what he does, when he's got the pill, Pez. He ranked 4th in tackles, averaging 7 per game, which is huge. So not only is he getting the pill, he's putting his body on the line, he's getting in there, and he's turning a lot of that time into inside 50s. You look at how poor Gold Coast were across the year, and he ranked 37th in inside 50s across the league. And that's really big from a key midfielder, and it's really important, as we sort of touched on in the pre-show, Pez, that they went half the year without a ruckman, or 3/4 of a year without a dominant ruckman. So he's in there doing the hard work, and realistically, it was a dominant performance from Gold Coast, much that we've seen previously from their one-trick ponies in Gary Ablett. And that's what it sort of echoes. Basically, you have to concede when you're playing Gold Coast. Took Miller's going to get a heap of the ball. He's going to damage us. We need to make sure that we stop everyone else and just let him do his thing.
Yeah, and you mentioned the big injury there, and that was Jared Witts. And when he went down, it was pretty much Gold Coast season over, because they were very competitive at the start of the year. We move on to the other expansion club in the GWS Giants. We spoke about Toby Green. He's been a one-time All-Australian, and he's in there again. He did miss a few games throughout the year, which really cost GWS in those games. But when he came in, he'll be the new captain into the new season, and it'll be interesting to see how he goes in that, what do they call it, the Battle of the Bridge or whatever, and it'll be in an elimination final, which will be absolutely fantastic this weekend. And Jacob Hoppo, who had a really consistent season in that GWS Giants midfield as well.
Yeah, a really, really consistent season, Pez, and he played 20-something games for them as well, and that was the big problem with GWS's midfield this year, is that they couldn't get the regular team on the park, and he was one of the big reasons that they were still staying relevant midway through the season, and they made that late charge. It's really good for him. I don't know if he'll make the top 22 pairs, but it's good recognition for his hard work that he's been doing there. I think Toby Green's a lock. I think number one in goal assist. He's damaging. His stats probably in terms of possessions don't line up, but he's top 10 in so many in forward categories that he's just,
number one in behinds for the competition source.
Okay,
number one player of behinds.
That's a big one. My apologies, but I think he's a lock, and I think he'll be a real real force if they are to go far in September, as we saw a couple of years ago.
Yeah, probably the most valuable player in the comp for his team when you speak about those three words as what they mean, most valuable player. Hawthorne is next. Tom Mitchell, the only one being named, two-time All-Australian already in 17 and 18. And we've spoken about his impact, and I'm understanding why Sydney didn't play him more regularly when he was on their list.
Yeah, I mean, look, you have to congratulate him on making the effort. He does lead the category. He does lead the league in possessions. He does sort of get a lot of the pill. He is quite efficient when he does get it. But I definitely understand the same thing, Pez, because, you need that to result in impact. And I don't want to sit here and badmouth someone who has made, one of the top 40 players in the league. But it's really hard to when you look at some of these numbers, Pez, because, he averages, 36, 37 a game. And when they have big wins and they have, really impactful wins, he doesn't generally play a big part. Like, he's one of those players where you look at the stats and you're like, oh, shit, he's got 20 in the first quarter. I didn't even really notice him. Because he sort of just gets it and he gives it off to other people that make impact. And maybe it's because he's not so flashy and he's just a workman. But yeah, it's something that you can understand why Sydney didn't play him as much.
That's one thing about him is the effort and the hard running that he does, to get to all those contests and to be able to get the pill out. So it is a credit to him. I don't see him making the 22, but stranger things have happened before. You head to Melbourne, and this is where, they've got the most players at all from all. They won after the siren in their game, they actually got and stole top spot on the ladder on the weekend. So Bailey Fritsch has never been All-Australian before. He was named. Jake Lever, Stephen May, and Christian Salem. So all of those players never been named All-Australian before. Max Gawn is a 4-time All-Australian already, so he's probably going to get his fifth. You've got Clayton Oliver, who's a one-time All-Australian, and Petrarca, who's a one-time All-Australian. So Petrarca's definitely in that 22, and there'd be an argument for Oliver as well.
Yeah, I think Petrarca's definitely in there, and I think you could make an argument for Oliver being there as well, because them two have been an extremely dominant force pairs. But I think the most impressive inclusion for this is you knew that Max Gawn, while Melbourne finishing top, we're going to make he was going to make the top 40 list. This is probably one of his best and most impactful seasons, only not just as a dominant ruckman pairs, because we've seen his impact across the ground. Him going forward, leading some of the top 20 in intercept marks. He's really putting his value across the ground and not just getting 40 hitouts a game and 30 hitouts a game. And I know last couple of years you've been really sort of against Max Gawn as the number one ruckman. Obviously, your argument has been about two ruckmen, but him being one of the dominant ruckmans in the All-Australian, and I think you have to tip your hat this year to the effort that he's put out, and it's probably one of his best seasons. Oh,
100%, and he can have it this year, but as long as there's only one ruckman, because I don't want two ruckmen in there because it just takes away another spot. But the most interesting thing for me about those names there, you've got Stephen May and Jake Lever, who were big recruits to the club, and they were being badmouthed when Melbourne weren't travelling so well. And they've turned it around, a really strong defence, which is why Melbourne, are at the top of the ladder where they are at the moment. So those two aren't failures and have been really big parts. And Stephen May and Jake Lever, possible All-Australians this year, with Christian Salem running off the half-back. That says a lot about your defence.
Yeah, your man, Christian Salem, Pez.
No, there we go. We can't get everything right, but sometimes you do get it right. North Melbourne is the next club, and they don't have any, probably none deserving. One of the youngest lists in the league and most inexperienced lists in the league as well. So they're still developing. Hopefully they can get some good recruits. Taron Thomas looks like he's, going well. Jaden Stevenson, if he can get some more consistency within his game, looks like he can continue to go ahead as well. So positive signs for the future for North Melbourne. They can't go any lower.
No, they can't, Pez. Only up from here, fingers crossed, unless they have less wins than last year. But, we were going to talk about them a little bit later in the show, but they had an improving season, and it's no surprise that they didn't have any All-Australians nominated this year, Pez.
No, definitely not. Port Adelaide, on the other hand, were able to finish second and get a home final, which is really good, with three previously, no previous All-Australians. So Alia, big intercept marker who doesn't play in a man usually. He gets named there. Carl Amon, who was kind of took over from Zach Butters in the middle of the year source, where he was their player that they wanted to get the ball in his hands, and he was their link-up player in the middle of the 50s. And then Ollie Wines, who had an absolute stellar season and just showed his worth. And I think there might be a typo here as well because I don't see Travis Boak's name.
Yeah, I mean, before we get on to Travis Boak, Pez, like Ollie Wines had a sneaky good season. Like he had one of those seasons that sort of went totally under the radar because of how poor Port Adelaide were doing. And then towards the end of the year when they surged forward, he came into his name in contention. There's talks about him in a couple of different one of those Brownlow polling predictors that he's actually winning the Brownlow, and he had a sneaky good year. Top 10 in inside 50s. He has top 10 in clearances, top 10 in stoppages around the ground. He made a definite impact. Number 4 in contested possessions across the ground. A sneaky good season, and it's one of those out of Victoria effects, Pez, that because they're out of Victoria, and this is Travis Boak's problem, was that they're not in Victoria and they're not getting talked about for what they're worth.
He's absolute style. If he was in Victoria, there would be massive talks about him and the Brownlow medal because it's not just the impact of the contested possessions. These type of players, sometimes they'll get like 15 disposals a game and like they'll have a decent game, but he's getting consistent 30 disposals a game where 21, 22 of them are contested and they're a clearance or they're an inside 50. They're score assists. So really, really good there. Alia had a good season. If you're looking for an intercept marker there, you're probably going to Tom Stewart over Alia. So might not make the final 22, but here's a steal from Sydney still here. Had an absolutely amazing season for them and, had a few matchups that he didn't like throughout the year, but other matchups where clubs didn't know what to do against him and had, a big impact in those games and those wins. So, and then we spoke about Amon and his link-up play in the middle of that ground. So I still am looking for Travis Boak's name there, but it's still not coming up. So is he a snub?
He's easily the biggest snubber of the year, Pez. And if you're going to make one argument for them, he's one of those snubs that actually could make the top 20, the actual 22 list. He had an incredible year. Some would say probably not as good as his year last year, but you think of last year, he's gone from he was vice captain of this squad last year. He averaged over 25 a game and 6 clearances. This year, he's averaging 27 and over 6 clearances per game. It's unbelievable that probably because he came from nowhere last year. Came from nowhere, he got his third All-Australian cap. And then this year, we're holding him up as a higher expectation. And he's performed the exact same way, which is really disappointing for him. Not for him, sorry. It's disappointing us as a media, the outlets, that's how they're viewing it.
No, don't blame me because I would have had him in.
It's all your fault,
there. He's ready to go and ready to get that cap. But hopefully, it puts a little bit of fire in his belly and he can show us in finals footy how good is that finals footy is coming. That he'll be able to perform big because he's been going up and been involved in a lot of goals and a lot of scores as well, which is a big thing for the midfielders. Usually we'd spend an hour on the Richmond All-Australian selections, but they don't have any this year, so and finished outside the 8. So see you later, Richmond. Don't have to speak about you.
Yeah, we sort of spoke about that earlier in the show, Pez, that they had a lot of injuries and, it is surprising not to see a Richmond name there with some of those big names like, Dusty Martin, Reroll. You've got the little meatball. There's a range of players that could have definitely made it, but they just weren't on the park for consistently across the year.
No, one is probably Jaden Short, who's, one of the most accurate kicks in the league, but there's already those type of players in there type of thing and maybe didn't have the biggest impact. So you move to St Kilda and you've just got one man there, the captain, Jack Steele. He was a 2020 All-Australian last year, so he's going for his second. He was easily the Saints' best player and will win their best and fairest, most consistent performer and added goal kicking to his repertoire this season.
Yeah, had an unbelievable season, Pez. Top 10 in clearances, top 5 in stoppages around the ground. As you said, he started to kick some goals. He had, top 20 in inside 50s and number 2 in tackles, Pez. And he's known for his hardness and that approach on the pill, but he was an out-and-out star this year. And I actually think that he had a much, much better year this year than last year. And he's going to be really, really tough to make that side pass. It's going to be interesting because he is fighting against a spot where I think wins start to matter a little bit.
Oh, he made the interchange last year, and personally, I am a St Kilda supporter. I don't think he makes the All-Australian side this year. With his performance there, I think, he... I don't even know what to say. He just doesn't make it against all these other midfielders there. There's no space for him.
Yeah, there's no space for him, and which is unfortunate because, as we both said, he had a better year than he did last year. But you look at some of the other names in the years around him, yeah, they just didn't translate to wins. Yeah,
well, we got Sydney, who had a big transformation, finishing 16th last year, and they come up and they finished 6th, where they played GWS this week. Lance Franklin, an 8-time All-Australian, going for his 9th there. Callum Mills and Tom Papley have been named in the 40 squad, never been an All-Australian before. And Luke Parker, who was an All-Australian 5 years ago, he gets another crack at it. He had a really consistent season in that midfield there, Luke Parker, each week. Callum Mills off the back line there. And then Tom Papley, he's always up and about and has big impacts on games. So not a lot of disposals, but a massive impact.
Sydney's a really interesting one, Pez. I could see them getting 3 of those 4 players, or not getting any players. Like it's a really interesting one. They had a pretty consistent year. They had a lot of good players. They didn't have any standout players, and I think early on in the year they surprised a lot of people. I think maybe Lance Franklin might make it just on the 9 time, and he has the record and he's going to go for his thousands. He had a good year. Didn't play a lot of games. He played under 17 games, which is rare. So he's the only player
nearly 3 goals a game.
Yeah,
nearly 3 goals.
Extremely great averages, Pez. But I wouldn't be surprised if they have no players make it. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they had 3 players or 4 players make it. They're really hard to sort of gauge their success. And as you said, we spoke earlier about having key position players. They got 2 forwards. They got a backman. You got a midfielder as well. The spine is full.
It shows you. And there you go. But Luke Parker. A stellar season from him in that Sydney midfield, who was a winning midfield in the end, when finishing 6th as well. West Coast, 2000, Nat Nui, he was All-Australian 2012 and 2020. He's in the 40 squad at the moment. I know he had a big game, I think it was the last round or the second last round. But for mine, Nat Nui, one of the best tap ruckmen I've seen, but he's not on the field for long enough, and he doesn't have as big an impact as he should be having, because he had 21 disposals, I think it was, in the last round, and 20 of those were contested.
Yeah, he's a really interesting one, Pez, because you look at him on the season that he has, and you sort of sit there and go, oh yeah, like he's a great tap ruckman. He gets the clearances, but when you look at the stats, Pez, they really surprise me. He's number 4 for clearances total for the whole year. He's number 5 for clearances per game. He's number 2 for stoppage clearances. So he's not just a tap ruckman. He's actually getting the pill himself, but it's what he's doing with the pill after. And as you said, I think that the tweet that came out last year about his fitness around the ground and getting to some of those other contests, he spends all his effort winning the ball out of the ruck, and it affects the rest of his play across the field.
Yeah, well, there was that one stage where he had a mark drought as well last season, when he wasn't going around the ground and getting the pill, but his clearance work and inside there is amazing. If you're going to choose a ruckman for your tap ruckman and your clearance work on the inside, you choose a Nat Nui. But you're not getting the high percentage of game time. You're not getting the fitness. You're not getting that defensive play around the ground, and you're not getting the big marks up forward and going back and kicking goals. He'll kick goals out of the middle and out of the clearance, and he might run past 2 or 3 guys, but he's not doing that consistently enough to get another cap.
No, I totally agree, Pez. And he's one of those players, as you said, you look at the stats and they blow you away, but then when you actually watch him play and you look at the impact compared to Sean Darcy and Max Gawn, and there's no chance that he's making it this year.
No, we speak about the Western Bulldogs, and won't we have something to say about the Western Bulldogs this week in our show? Absolutely blowing a top 4 opportunity. So they finished 5th and continue to go from there. So they've got Marcus Bontempelli, a 3-time All-Australian, might as well say a 4-time All-Australian right now, because he's in that 22. You got Bailey Dale, who's big off the half-back line, and they trusted the ball in his hands. And Jack Mcrae, 2-time All-Australian, going for 3 in a row. Jack Mcrae, some of the most second most disposals in the competition, and they like to get him the ball to kick it inside 50 as well. So even though he handballs a lot, he does have a big impact, and he's got a good left boot.
A huge impact, Pez. This was an unbelievable year from Jack Mcrae, and a lot of people, they talk about Bont and his impact, and he breaks those games open. But his year this year, Jack Mcrae, was unbelievable. He talked about him leading possession getters and clearances, but not only that, he ranked 13th in inside 50s, Pez, and 11th in score involvements as well. That's exactly what you want from your midfield, and that's what we were talking earlier about Tom Mitchell. Is you want someone that is not only getting the ball, but is involved in the ball going forward. He's involved in all your score involvements. He ranks top 40 in tackles. Like, he does a little bit of everything, and as you said, he sneaks forward and seems to pop a goal every single week.
Oh, and yeah, it's pretty unbelievable. I think both of those players will make it. Jack Mcrae is a good winger. Put him out on the left wing there and let him go to work, and then Bontempelli from that midfield. Bailey Dale, he's a decent shot as well with the early form that the Western Bulldogs had. They did lose some unlosable games at the end of that year there to go from there, and they've got a big final against Essendon because a lot of supporters are really hanging off the Western Bulldogs to keep that Essendon 6,000 plus days of not winning a final streak alive.
Yeah, it's going to be a really tough one for us this week, Pez Barragan, for that game. Because I tell you what, we're going to talk about it a little bit on the next show. Make sure you tune in for that one coming out Friday. But I was actually cheering so hard for Brisbane to win that game, to kick Western Bulldogs out. And then I'm like, well, I don't know who to cheer for next week. So really tough, Pez. But a great season for Western Bulldogs. It's a shame that if they don't go far in September, it's going to be remembered for the choke job they had the last 3 rounds.
Yeah, definitely. Now, in speaking of snubs, I've probably named the big snubs that I thought Sauce, and you probably have as well. So Travis Boak, we both agree, should be in that squad of 40, and then you've got Cam Guthrie, who I think should also be in that squad of 40. But I think they've got a lot of the players correct this season.
Yeah, I mean, the only other two that we sort of mentioned in the show previous, Pez, was Libba. Libba had a really good year. He fell off towards the end, but so did every other Western Bulldogs player in that squad. He finished second in clearances, 9th in contested possessions, and the other one that you could make an argument for, but again, it fits perfectly into the team that we spoke about, is Hickey. Tom Hickey from Sydney. That he could either make that squad or none of those could make him, because he was one of those players that had an increasingly, an unbelievable year, and probably if you look at stats wise and impact, was the second best ruckman across the year. But does that mean that he's going to get a top 40 spot? Is he a snub? I think Max Gawn, Sean Darcy, Nat Nui all had better seasons than him.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. What is he? The 4th best ruckman in a year, and you can't have 4 ruckmen in that 40 squad there. So it'll be interesting to see which players actually. Yeah, interesting to see which players get snubbed into the 22 later on in the final series here. But that's so congratulations to all the players that made the All Australian, including Tom Mitchell, even though we spoke like he didn't make it. But no, it's a really, really good achievement, and 22 of them will be adding a stellar little milestone onto their career stats.
Yeah, an amazing milestone, Pez, and especially in a year like this year, Pez, where it was one of the most open finals, one of the most open years in terms of competitive football, and every week seems like that the games were a lot closer, and they needed to bring their best effort, and it's very rare that we sit here and go, you know what, there's no one in that squad that we sit there and go shouldn't be in there. Every other year, you're sort of like, oh, I can't believe he made it, or I can't believe this person made it. You could make an argument for all 40 of those players on the years that they had, if not compared to other people across the league, and just say on their own merit and what they've done, they could definitely make that squad.
100%. So there's the All-Australian. I'm sure we'll speak about it when the 22 are named and capped, and looking at midfielders in really strange positions in back pockets and forward pockets and things like that. But we will move on to another part of our show where season over, or hashtag season over Sauce, where we might play the intro and then we'll explain how we do it.
Season over.
Yes, Pez. Season over. What we do, it's pretty simple, Pez. There are 10 teams that the season is over. We'll go through 6 tonight, starting from the bottom in the 18th, work our way up, and each team will give a hashtag that sort of sums up their season or sums up a moment of the season, or maybe even sums up where they're going towards in the future? I know the last couple of years you've had North Melbourne moving to Tassie, Pez, and with the announcement today that there is a succession plan for Tasmania. In 3 more years, they'll actually may have a decision. Not whether they're going to have a team or not. There'll be a decision in 3 more years whether it is actually going to be that happening, Pez. So I wonder if that adjusts your hashtag.
No, definitely not. It definitely hasn't. So, as we said, we'll speak about 6 teams here. Next week, we'll speak about the next 6 teams, which will include the rest of the bottom 10 and the 2 teams that get knocked out in finals. And then after that, we've got a couple of teams to do after that. So we'll give a hashtag and talk about their season a little bit from there. So we start at the bottom of the letter source. We start with North Melbourne. So they had 4 wins. They had a draw as well in there. They had 17 losses, source, with a percentage of 70.27. So the worst percentage in the league, with a couple of big losses throughout that. So only the 4 wins. They were, the favourite from before the year for the wooden spoon. The question is, for North Melbourne fans, have they improved?
I mean, in terms of the wins, Pez, they had 3 wins last year in 17 games, and then they had 4 this year with 22. So, I mean, they've won one more. They also had a draw in there as well, Pez. So, I mean, I think improvement, I think they've definitely improved. And, my hashtag for them it's been a hashtag noble effort. I think that the coaching staff that they've implemented this year and the way that they've implemented a game plan and stuck with, they haven't worried about results. They haven't worried about, playing their senior players. They've literally gone with a proper developmental plan that we were calling for, 4 years ago, Pez? And they've stuck to it. And what you're seeing gradual improvement. They, I think it was 16 of their 22 lines this year they covered. So that's a signs of an improving side.
Oh, 100%, and I like that. Noble of you to use noble in that hashtag there. But I don't know how you knew about my hashtag. Because my hashtag is hashtag Tasmania Special, the North Melbourne Tasmania Special site.
The one thing you are, Pez, is consistent.
Yeah.
Not the same for a lot of the other teams in the bottom 8, but you are definitely consistent.
I couldn't go past just putting that little bit out there. They might play better footy down there, and maybe they should consider moving down there instead of to the sunny Gold Coast where they got offered 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think the next couple of years they're on the up. Whether they're in Tasmania or they're in North Melbourne, or if they get shipped off somewhere else to New Zealand or something. But they had 12 players this year under 23 play 15 or more games, which is huge. They also had a young group of almost bona fide stars. If you were just watching that game and you're looking at their effort, they're not stars across the league yet. But it's a watch this space, Pez. Jai Simpkin, Luke Davis-Uniacke, Taron Thomas, Nick Larkey, and at times throughout the year, Zerha really, showed that he's got a lot of potential moving forward. And they're going to hit the draft this year. They're going to get the number 2 pick, the bloke from Adelaide, unless they do a deal with Adelaide. And they're going to be building stronger. And he's apparently ready-made, so up for them next year. I think the only place to go is up.
Yep, that's it. And if they can get 5 wins next year, it'll be another improvement, and they can continue maybe with another wooden spoon. We'll see. We'll go to the 17th side, which is the Collingwood Magpies, and Collingwood fans will be really disappointed with this season. We had Bucks who got sacked, or if you want to call it, stood down himself, which he didn't. He got sacked. They had 6 wins, 16 losses, a percentage of 85.64. So a percentage that's a lot more competitive than the 70% there. So they had 9 wins last season and a draw. They finished 8th, but this season down to 6 wins and 17th on the ladder, which is a really, really low position for Collingwood.
I mean, I think, Pez, this one here, I'm just going to say it's hashtag we called it, because it all started with their off-season debacle. And not just off-season, Pez, they're off-field as well. I mean, this year they saw the step down of Nathan Buckley. He was lost his job halfway through the season. Yeah, the departures of Adam Treloar in a ridiculous fashion and totally mismanaged across a range of different things. And Tom Phillips that really left a big hole in their midfield, all because they managed their list poorly. You also had Eddie Maguire replaced halfway through the year after he said he was going to stay and retire at the end of the year. But the pressure from, the allegations of the racist culture that Collingwood was happening, the do better report, he was stood down as well. So it all, for me, it was all a result and all of from their off-season management.
Yep, and my hashtag there, hashtag Wobblewood, because they wobbled all the way down to 17th position on the ladder there. And you know what? I quite enjoyed Collingwood's season. I enjoyed watching them play footy and lose a lot of games by a lot. And it was just really enjoyable. We had Robert Harvey come in and try and coach them in a defensive mindset, which didn't really work. It looked better when they, went full out attack towards the end of the season. But they need to get somebody in there that's either going to, start a rebuild, use the core, do whatever they need to do, and just turn over that list and kind of really start again. When you go to the bottom, that's what you kind of have to do, and they need to try and build back up to play finals in 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and they did that, Pez. I mean, they debuted 9 players this year, equal most in the competition, next to Adelaide. They had a couple of first-round picks. They need to go back to the draft and start building, and it'll be interesting once they actually hire a coach and see what's happening, because after their exit interviews, it'll be interesting who's still there and who's not, especially with, some of the confusion again this week with the off-field stuff from Pendlebury.
Yeah, big confusion there, but he's cleared it up, saying he wants to play finish his career at Collingwood and not go somewhere else. I thought when I first read it in the media, he was going to do a Sam Mitchell type thing and go to an interstate club and then coach from there. But he's open to coaching after that. But everyone knows that he's going to be a coach in the making and with his football mind. And best of luck to him. But he wants to be a one club player and he won't be playing in any more finals.
Yeah, he also has a basketball background, Pez. Just I'm not sure.
Oh, don't tell me that. Don't tell me that. On that note, we'll move on to the Gold Coast Suns. Really disappointing season for them. They had 7 wins, which 7 wins, 15 losses, whereas last year they had 5 wins and a draw. So they had more wins than they did last year, but they actually finished lower on the ladder.
Yeah. This is really disappointing for them because what they showed last year and what we've been talking about for the last couple of years, they were the team that was meant to make the big jump. Maybe not make finals, but they should have been finishing well above where they finished this year. My hashtag for them, Pez, is Took's a star. And I've got 2 aspects for that. Obviously, Took Miller, absolute gun, and he carried them to finish a lot higher than they would have if he wasn't there. But the second aspect is the star, because the sun is actually a star, Pez, and in order to, if you were to travel to the sun, it would take 19 years to reach there. And I think that's how long it's going to take the Suns to climb up this ladder. And they're coming into their 12th year, Pez, and they're still a long way away. I mean, not 93 million miles away, but they're still a little while away, and they need to make that big jump that we all predicted from that young talent there. They're starting to sign players on, but the big question that's going to come out is Stuart Dew the person to do that? Yeah,
and that's a big talk around that is where is Alistair Clarkson going to go? And there's been some talk there. But they need a ruckman. They need a consistent ruckman throughout the year. Jared Witts was a bad injury. They've got King up forward and they've got Lukosius down back. They've got Greenwood, who's a great tackler in the middle and puts on the pressure with Took Miller and some other players there. So they've got things to work with. We've got Raul, who had a disappointing season when he played and was an absolute star when he first came in. But hopefully with another preseason, he can just stay injury-free for the rest of his career and then go from there. So my hashtag is a little play on their song. I've changed their song a little bit. So instead of saying we are the sons of the Gold Coast sky, we are the sons of the Gold Coast grave, because they are digging themselves a deep hole. The graveyard, I don't know, they just can't get over it. Any team in Gold Coast, as was spoken about in the past. So this Gold Coast side, not too great in 2021. A very, very disappointing and losing season. Yeah, very disappointing for them, Pez. And they did get hit with injuries, as you mentioned. As you said, they just need to get a consistent approach running there. They had a couple of, really, really good, genuine wins. They beat Sydney, Richmond, GWS, all teams that have, we're fighting for a top 8 squad, and Richmond not making it, the other 2 top 8 sides. It's just they've got to build that consistency, and that's only going to happen through another preseason, some consistency in terms of the coaching there, and the message just getting across, and them just working hard. They've recruited these young players. They need to keep them. They need to work hard and get better, and fingers crossed that it's not a long, long way away for them to actually make finals, Pez. No, another 7 years, you said. 19 years it takes
19 years.
to reach the sun there. But the next side we have to talk about is the Adelaide Crows, finishing and rounding out the bottom four of the competition. They also had 7 wins, 15 losses, and a percentage of 81.99. So percentage isn't horrible below 80, but it is there. They only had 3 wins last year and won a wooden spoon. To get 7 wins this year is a big improvement. 3 of those wins coming in the first 4 rounds.
Yeah, and that's exactly where my hashtag is, Pez. Hashtag early crow. Because they got out of the blocks running. They were playing a high brand, high contested, physical brand of football, which they seemed to, keep out through most of the year. There was a couple of times that they sort of got, thumped, but most of the time they developed a heap of youth. They were competitive in a lot of games. They had some absolute standouts, in our man Ben Keys. You had Rory Laird there, who had an unbelievable season, as well as Jordan Butts. He had a breakout campaign, locked up that number 1 defensive spot, and some of the other youth coming through, Schoenberg, Scholl, Ned McHenry, Chase Jones, Jordan Butts, as I mentioned, and their big number 2 draft pick, Rolly Filthorpe.
Yeah, he was probably the big shining light, the 18-year-old who went down to Tasmania and kicked 5 in one of the games.
His
looks
debut,
like a really,
his debut.
yeah, really strong contested marker, and will be a really good forward in the AFL in years to come. My hashtag for them is just hashtag insignificant Crows, because there's not really too much to say about them. We expected them to be poor and down the bottom of the ladder, and they surprised us with a win against Geelong in round 1. And if Geelong had won that game source, they would have also finished minor premiers as well. So they didn't have to take it down to the last kick of the season. But that's just on another note.
Yeah, thanks for that, Pez. Are we doing St Kilda this week or next week? I'm a little bit unsure.
That'd be next week, not in the bottom 6, unfortunately, this year. So there we go with the Adelaide Crows. The next side is Hawthorne. So Alistair Clarkson finished off his career at Hawthorne and hands over the reins to Sam Mitchell on 7 wins, 2 draws. So Hawthorne involved in 2 draws. That one against Richmond was really, really poor, the last 5 goals, but that's another story as well. 85%. They had 5 wins last year, 7 wins and 2 draws this year. So you take the 2 draws, add that another win. So maybe they had 8 wins.
Yeah, my hashtag for this one, Pez, is really, really simple, because we're going to be hearing about this for the next 2 or 3 years, depending on the success, is the succession plan. That's what we're going to be hearing. And to me, this season was hashtag unplanned, because it seemed like they were going, they actually rated themselves as a contender, which we knew from that list that they didn't have a very talented list, a lot of aging stars. And, on in hindsight, they end up having a little bit of a talent there, but they didn't seem to have any at the start of the year. And what happened is the moment that Alistair Clarkson sort of got the tap on the shoulder, he went out of tank mode and said, you know what, the big forks to the Hawthorne, and just started winning games. So it just seems unplanned. It seems like they were planning to go to the draft. They were planning for a rebuild. They were saying that Clarkson, he was the person for the job. He said he didn't want to be there. Then they had the succession plan with Sam Mitchell. They said he was going to be there. Now he's not there. Now he's not coaching. Just to me, it seems unplanned and pretty unorganised and un-Hawthorne-like, which you hear a lot as well.
Yeah, you definitely do. But I've really enjoyed my music this week, Source, and obviously been listening to Gold Coast Suns theme song. I was also listening to the Hawthorne theme song, and I've made a little bit of a change there. We're a handball team at Hawthorne, and the reason they are, we've got the most handballs in the competition over the Western Bulldogs by 87 handballs. But the interesting stat for me is handball and kick differential with the team. They're the only team with no more than 1,000 kicks than handballs. So every other team has more than 1,000 kicks than handballs, but Hawthorne, they don't have over 1,000 kicks than handballs. So maybe that's not working too well for them.
That's really interesting, Pez. Stats man you are, and a bit of a musical man as well there, Pez.
Yeah, get the the Apple Music, playing the club theme songs and getting a little bit of inspiration.
Pez is doing a bit of a Hawthorne remix. We're a handball team at Hawthorne. I like it, Pez. But they did have a couple of young players that sort of show that they have got some sort of future there. CJ, he came out of the ranks, absolutely, no one picked him to have the way that he opened the season up. Yeah, Dylan Moore, Jacob Kaczynski, and Lockie Bramble, sorry. They were all sort of, the mid-year recruit. They all had sort of positive years, but there is they need to hit that draft, Pez, and they need to hit it hard.
Yeah, I didn't mind. I don't mind Mitch Lewis up forward. He's a developing forward who could turn into, a bona fide star of the AFL. You've got Warple, who probably had a disappointing year. You had Sicily, who sat out injured for most of the year. And Will Day, who was injured as well, is, as we know, one of my favourites when I was watching Will Day play a little bit. But I hope he gets on the park a little bit more next season and will be one of Sam Mitchell's favourite players, I imagine.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. Watch this space for the next 12 months, Pez, because all the talking is going to be about how Sam Mitchell replicates one of the greatest coaches in history and how he follows them up, because he's not in a position that's going to allow him to be successful realistically, is it, Pez? Because they've sacked the coach basically, and he's gone on a 6-game where they didn't lose within 6 games. They had 2 draws within that and four wins. So it's one of those things that they're leaving that, like all succession plans. It'll be interesting to see if this one actually pans out.
Yeah, well, he's got probably three years of freedom where he can just go and it won't matter about his record. And he'll go from that because he is a Hawthorne legend there. And the good thing is he's had experience elsewhere as well. Carlton round out the bottom 6 of the 2021 season. And could you believe it? 8 wins, 14 losses, percentage of 88%. They had a really bad loss to Collingwood at the start of the year, and it really set the tone for them throughout the year. We spoke about their All-Australians with Harry Mcrae, Sam Welsh and Jacob Wiedering, that spine All-Australian contention, but just couldn't get the job done. To lose 6 more games than you win with that list is just not good enough.
Yeah, Pez, and 3 of those losses that you spoke about, those costly losses, all were to teams that we've already mentioned: Collingwood, Gold Coast, and North Melbourne. They win those 3 games, they're playing finals. And, to me, that really sort of showcases exactly who Carlton are. # show us your blue colours, because that's who they are.
Yeah, well, if they did win those 3 games, Source, they would have had enough wins for finals, but not enough percentage.
Well, if they actually put away those teams like we spoke about throughout the year, Pez, they would have, because
they could have. All right,
it's interesting, and it's another watch this space, because now that Alistair Clarkson has come out and said, you know what, no, I'm not going to coach next year. I'm taking 12 months to, in the inverted commas, travel the world in the COVID-driven world that he can't actually travel. They've said they're having those exit meetings with all the players, and Teague has no idea what he's doing. And to me, it's setting up for another season of disappointment next year for Carlton.
Yeah, well, the coaching ranks there, interesting, with Clarko being announced that, he's out of the race there, because I'm sure that's why Carlton would have put that forward, because they wanted to, land that big fish where they didn't. So my hashtag is blue feelings, because these blue supporters, they'll be feeling really blue and have been feeling really blue for many, many, many years. And we just want to know when they are coming.
Yeah, well, maybe it is soon, Pez. They had a nice breakout year from Harry Mcrae. He won the Coleman with missing the last 3 games with 58 goals. But it's for me, we had a standout season from Sam Walsh. We said that they have 3 staples across their midfield, their forward and their back line. It was their off-season recruits, Pez, and that really is interesting, because has that put them back 2 or 3 years? Williams was a huge bust for him. They recruited him for this big busting midfielder. And for half of the season, and when he showed actual success, they played him in defence. It'll be interesting to see what happens in terms of their development. But for me, they overshot the mark again, where they thought they were ready for finals. They're coming. The infamous sort of slogan that they had from 2002, last time that they were near finals, I think it was. But they're setting themselves up for a failure next season as well.
Yeah, well, that recruit, was a bust. He'd want to be able to turn himself around, and he didn't look to have the fitness to play in the midfield that they recruited him for on the $800,000 a year. So he needs to really go away in that preseason, work hard, and earn his money in that midfield, because he was good in patches of games, but he's not consistent enough over the 4 quarters to be that $800,000 a year player. If you're going to get paid that amount of money, you want a bigger impact from that player for your side. So that rounds out the bottom 6. Disappointing seasons for all of them. Slow improvements for some, and really big downfalls for others.
Yeah, I think that's a really good summary, Pez. There were some teams we expected, and even though we expected them to be down there, it still is disappointing from a supporter, from some of the output that they played across some of the games. And then there are some of those teams that we sort of surprised us. We both had Gold Coast creeping up the ladder. I had Carlton sort of fighting for a top 8 squad. And both teams that sort of let us down there, Pez, as well as their supporters.
Yeah, I had Gold Coast fighting for the 8 as well, and they're down there in the bottom 3. So really disappointing. And injuries do play a part in some of these teams. But you look at the Carltons and the Hawthorns and the Collingwoods, you want to expect a little bit of a higher standard there. But there has to be teams in the bottom 6, and these are the teams from this year, and they'll be working really hard to get a higher position on the ladder. And there's going to be big expectations from Carlton. Not so much big expectations from any of the other 5 clubs that we spoke about tonight.
Maybe Gold Coast if they get some of those players back from injury and they have a good pre-season, because they need to start hitting that mark soon. Otherwise, I think there's not pressure on the club, but there's pressure on Stuart Dew. Oh,
there is pressure on Stuart Dew there, but Carlton are expected to continue to go up, and we'll see what happens with that list. And we've got Sam Walsh, Mcrae, and Wiedering, who could be all Australians, and we'll go from there. But there's the first 6 source. In our show next week, we'll do the next 6, and there'll be 2 teams that have been eliminated from the finals. So a short-lived final series.
Yeah, it'll be really good to start talking about Essendon again. There's the early dig for the Essendon fans. Just kidding. I'll be happy if either of the teams lose. But yeah, Pez. So make sure you tune in next week. But also make sure you tune in. Check our social media feeds as well as your podcast providers for our Friday show. Talk us through our fans. What's happening Friday, Pez?
Yeah, at Behind the Bound on Twitter. Jump on board. We've got. We had massive rounds for our cheeky punt source, so we're continuing to make profit there, which is amazing. And we will speak about the end of the season and the finals matchups for this round. So really big stuff happening on Friday.
As well as that, Pez, we'll look at who made the final 22 All-Australian squad. We might talk about snubs. Then generally someone's going to be unhappy, as well as a massive preview for a huge and probably one of the closest and open final races that we'll see in a little while, Pez.
Yeah, and we're going to have a new premier in 2021. So really interesting. So we'll see you back there on Friday. At Behind the Bound on Twitter. I'm Pez. Peace out.
I'm still Sauce. We'll catch up next time, guys.